occhio. Secondo me così si fa. Ride Caroline. Ok. Sì.
Non so,
Collegamento.
posso usare questo microfono che ci avete
Sì, qui adesso si
messo?
accende.
Grazie, e dovremmo ora fra poco attivare il collegamento con Chicago, come ci diceva il nostro direttore, con Michael Rakowitz. Ciao Michael, welcome.
Oh, ciao. Sorry I can't be there with you in person.
You will be with us very soon through these marvelous materials and flavors and smells. Questa sera, in occasione della 11ª giornata del Contemporaneo Amaci, Michael Rakowitz realizzerà in modo sostituto, e ci spiegherà lui che cosa significa per lui, un'azione performativa dedicata ad una antica tradizione sia di valore collettivo che di valore intimo e personale nella sua vicenda, nella sua narrazione, mi scuserà Cafo, biografica, e questo progetto rientra nella collaborazione tra il Castello di Rivoli Museo d'Arte Contemporanea e il Parco Archeologico di Pompei, e nella fattispecie nella programmazione sperimentale di arte contemporanea sulle varie definizioni possibili di arte contemporanea, intitolata Pompeii Commitment, Materie, archeologiche. Si tratta di una piccola produzione che questa sera ci accompagnerà appunto tra Rivoli, Chicago e Pompei, tra il passato, il presente e il futuro, e tra diverse tradizioni e esperienze, le quali ci saranno raccontate da Michael Rakowitz ed introdotte nello specifico da Marianna Vecellio, che cura questo progetto sia per il castello che per il Parco Archeologico di Pompei, e fra qualche giorno, non sappiamo esattamente quando, ma fra qualche giorno questa esperienza sarà restituita anche al famigerato pubblico digitale attraverso il cosmo digitale del sito web del Castello di Rivoli e il portale di ricerca www.pompeicommitment.org. La parola, ringraziandovi quindi, a Marianna.
Grazie Andrea e benvenuti ospiti questa sera. Sono molto felice di introdurre la conferenza performativa di Michael Rakowitz, Seder for Pompei, un progetto creato nell'ambito della collaborazione, come ha detto poc'anzi Andrea, tra Castello di Rivoli e Pompeii Commitment Archeological Matters, un programma a cura di Andrea Viliani con Massimo Osanna e Gabriel Zuchtriegel. Come ha detto poc'anzi Andrea, questo evento si tiene all'interno della 17ª giornata del contemporaneo promossa da Amaci, Associazione dei Musei d'Arte Contemporanea Italiani, con il patrocinio della Direzione Generale Creatività Contemporanea del Ministero della Cultura. Ringrazio Andrea Viliani di avermi invitato a curare questo contributo e anche quello precedentemente presentato qualche mese fa di Anna Bughighian. Bene, Michael Rakowitz è un artista molto importante per il nostro museo che gli ha dedicato già nel 2019 una importante retrospettiva in collaborazione con la Whitechapel di Londra. Michael è artista, è architetto, è insegnante e anche cuoco, come vedrete a breve. La sua arte è interessata a narrare quelle che sono le contraddizioni del contemporaneo, come i traumi della guerra, come i poveri che vivono nelle grandi metropoli occidentali, come coloro che sono costretti a viaggiare, costretti in esodo e a trovare riparo solo dopo molti anni. A proposito di questo, Michael è figlio di Frederick Rakowitz di origini ungheresi e Yvonne David di origine ebraico-irachene. Infatti la famiglia materna di Michael era proprio stata per molti anni in viaggio, aveva lasciato l'Iraq nel 1941 per insediarsi poi nel 1947 negli Stati Uniti. Michael nasce per cui nel 73 a Great Neck e si forma come all'inizio studente di grafica e successivamente segue la cattedra di arte pubblica presso il corso di architettura di MIT di Cambridge, seguendo le lezioni di John Jonas e Krzysztof Wodiczko, che lo conducono alla scoperta della relazione tra scultura, spazio pubblico e ritualità collettiva, un altro tema che anche oggi emergerà in questo incontro. Un anno importante, il 2004, quando gli Stati Uniti attaccano l'Iraq e che conducono Michael a cercare delle nuove narrazioni alternative a quelle che sono le narrazioni convenzionali che parlano di guerra, e così immagina progetti come Return, Enemy Kitchen, altri progetti che hanno come base la cucina. Ha partecipato a numerose rassegne internazionali d'arte contemporanea. Naturalmente, ricordo, documenta 13 nel 2012 a cura di Caroline Cristo-Bacargive, che è il nostro direttore, e anche della Biennale di Istanbul nel 2015, ma molte altre mostre, Sharjah e vi annoierei se continuassi con la lista, ma verrei al progetto di oggi, Seder for Pompei, che è un progetto di cui abbiamo cominciato a parlare con Michael, che erano i primi giorni di gennaio del 2021, e ricordo che eravamo entrambi, come il resto insomma, del mondo, reduci da giorni di isolamento a causa della pandemia, e un po' questo tema che era stato estremamente sentito per Michael e per la cultura ebraica, perché avevano festeggiato, proprio mi raccontava Michael, una Pasqua molto sentita, perché si trovavano ancora in isolamento, si trovavano distanti tra di loro, e la celebrazione pasquale ebraica ha proprio come preghiera principale quello di essere insieme. Questa riflessione e la recente scoperta di un termopolio, cioè una costruzione nell'area di Pompei adibita alla vendita del cibo da strada, per cui addirittura erano presenti all'interno delle vasche, dei residui di cibo, l'hanno condotto a immaginare un reincantamento di Pompei attraverso il Seder. Cos'è il Seder? Il Seder è un rituale, è una celebrazione che si tiene la prima sera della Pasqua ebraica, che la parola, come indica la parola, vuol dire sequenza o ordine, che consiste proprio in un ordine di pietanze e preghiere allo scopo di narrare la liberazione del popolo ebraico dalla schiavitù, dalla fuga dall'Egitto, le 10 piaghe, fino a ritrovarsi nella terra promessa. Così Michael ha immaginato questo reincantamento, perché Pompei è materia archeologica, ma è materia geologica, è materia ecologica. E così Seder for Pompei è un'opera che parla di nutrimento, di fantasmi, di reincantamento. E chiudo citando una frase dalla conversazione che ho avuto con Michael Rakowitz, che verrà pubblicata sul sito del Castello di Pompeii Commitment, che è una frase suggestiva e poetica di Michael, che dice: il momento in cui il cibo si incanta, quando pensiamo al fumo che sale dai nostri fornelli, mescolandosi al fumo che potrebbe ancora essere nell'area dell'eruzione, in quel momento entriamo a far parte del flusso della storia. Grazie. Thank you, Michael, for being here. Non lo sento.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. Posso chiedere al pubblico se parlate in inglese, perché questo progetto si tiene in lingua inglese. Bene, grazie.
Okay, thank you. You can all hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. We start with an introduction, kind of like a first prayer. Hi, how are you? It's been more than a year and a half, more than 2 years since we were together. And now, it's hard to need something much more than passive reading. Few better ways to hear a response. We are okay here. I do know I planned to be tonight in person, and I'm sorry that that was not possible. My wife and I celebrated Hanukkah, and like Passover, we could only celebrate with our extended family by the same means we are using right now. It got me thinking about how to spend time with one another even when we can't be together. For those of you who don't know, Passover is a Jewish holiday where friends and family gather together for a Seder, which means order in Hebrew. The Seder is basically an exhibition of different foods that symbolize the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The guide for this ritualized dinner is a book called the Haggadah, which I'll talk about later, which means the telling. I've come to realize that I'm always surrounding myself with objects that are telling me something. And maybe that is because I'm listening to them. The Passover story is one that unfortunately is not outdated. It tells of bondage, slavery, exile, exodus, liberation, the experience of the refugee, and the yearning for return. This has only come into sharper focus during the new plague of COVID-19. But we can yearn to be together. We can yearn together. And while we can't be together, we can locate one another and sculpt something from the distance between us. As an Arab Jew, I've always felt like Passover was even more important than Yom Kippur. It offers the possibility of introspection, of understanding how imperfect the world is, and that the promise of return or repair has been largely unfulfilled. And it provides a constructive coming together to speak and re-speak words in the hopes that next year we will celebrate together in the place we wish to be. It is like a visionary architectural drawing, a proposal for the not so impossible, yet infuriatingly elusive. Could Passover be a very old conceptual art project? A piece that was so good people decided to perform it year after year? Is it not like installation art, a sum of parts that make a whole, an environment where the object is important but decentralized, used as a transitional device by people who have come together in celebration? The objects on the Seder plate are metaphors. They are also substitutions. Substitute is derived from the Latin substituere, which comes from statuere, whose noun derivative is statua or statue. I have worked for much of the past 2 decades making sculptures that are substitutions for other sculptures that have disappeared or been destroyed. I've also been making Iraqi food in the diaspora, including using ingredients that are often different from the ones traditionally available in Mesopotamia. Substitutions for those things that are not readily available to me or my family. The magical meaning projected on the different items of the Seder plate has inspired me to think about how we might together create a new order of things. I will be your Haggadah, your guide. What I will present on my end is a collection of my own objects. They are talismans that keep me company in my studio and remind me of my purpose. And so Marianna just explained to you my relation to my elders, the artists who I was very lucky to work with at MIT, artists like Krzysztof Wodiczko and John Jonas. But one of the artists that I've also worked with is somebody that Carolyn and the Castello has worked with in the past, and that is Lawrence Weiner. And here's a photograph of Lawrence Weiner by a volcano. And sometimes eruptions happen in life that actually create a kind of nutrition for new things to happen. And one of the things that I remember in my experience working with Lawrence was he walked by my studio at MIT. He heard me playing a cassette of Iraqi Jewish music that I had just gotten in Jordan.
and he knocked on my door and he said to me, "This is the heartbeat of your work and you need to not be afraid of it." So I wanted to honor Lawrence and his life and thank him for that eruptive wisdom. My interest in doing something in Pompeii goes back to a childhood interest in geology and also the way the earth was formed, and realizing that everything that I found beautiful was somehow created through these kinds of geological cataclysms. And so one of the places that I asked Andrea and Marianna to send me more information about was the new discovery of the thermopolium, which is basically the Roman food stand. And this was like a fast food stand that sold things like duck and goat and snail. And I think about this fast food joint in contrast to the slowness of the Seder, but also in relationship to my own work. And this is my enemy kitchen food truck that I have here in Chicago that is staffed by Iraqi refugees and emigres who serve as chief chefs, and the sous chefs and servers are American soldiers who served in Iraq, who are now inverting the power dynamic that was in Iraq. So the Americans are finally taking orders from the Iraqis. So in order to start, I figured I'd show the first thing that I collected in relationship to this project as I was thinking about these things and going back and forth in conversation with Andrea and Marianna and Stella. And this is actually from 1896, a petrographic slide of volcanic dust at Pompeii. So looking very closely at the finest pixel of a mountain like Vesuvius and seeing the dust. What soon followed were pictures that were shared with me of the different items that were found in kitchens, things like walnuts that had been petrified, seafood, sea urchins. And something that these images reminded me of was the way in which food gets frozen in time. And it made me think about the ways in which some of these images echoed things that have actually been in my body. And this is a piece of Roman bread that was left in an oven and was incinerated to the point where it turned to stone. And so that made me think of matzah. And matzah is actually the ritual bread that is consumed during Passover. You're actually not allowed to eat any kind of leavened bread for the 8 days of the holiday festival, because this commemorates the fact that the bread that was taken by the Hebrews that left Egypt did not have time to rise. It was unleavened bread. So thinking about this as a kind of fossil, and believe me when I tell you this is so unpleasant to eat, it is like eating dust from a volcano. However, another image from the series excited me, because even though I can't verify this, and maybe Andrea or Marianna can tell me if I'm wrong or right, but these look to me a lot like dates. And the date has been present in my projects for a long time, specifically Iraqi dates. And one of the things that it was connected to was a photo of a pan that was found at Pompeii. And this looks a lot like a tray that I have that was smuggled out of Iraq by the Iraqi Jews when they had to leave. in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And they weren't allowed to take much with them. And they realized that the ceramic plates would end up breaking. And so this is the metal serving tray that actually survived the journey. That's from the Great Synagogue of Baghdad. It was used to serve in the synagogue during holiday celebrations that were either collective or for families. And so what I'd like to do now is to just kind of combine that kind of fossilized walnut and fossilized date. And this was the first thing I was going to serve to you, which is a very popular thing in my family and other Iraqi Jewish families. Is it's called joz wa tamar. Literally just means walnuts with dates. And if I was there, this would have been served to you on this plate to make that connection with a material culture that's based on departure, short amounts of time, and trauma. So let this taste of a date be a harbinger of sweeter times to come. So next, I guess we should start with the cooking. And so what I've done is I've taken 1 pound of lamb, and I know that Marianna and Andrea are working hard at their kitchen table that I can see from this very high up position in the theater. And so this is actually presented in another bowl that was taken out of Iraq by Jews who had to flee. And so the first thing that I'm going to do to add to the meat, this is a besamim spice container that's used during the Havdalah services, which is on Saturday night. So your time there to celebrate the end of Shabbat and the beginning of the new week. And you're supposed to put spices in this container so you can smell them. And so what I have in here is Iraqi Baharat spice mix that has things like cumin, has ginger, it has cardamom, it has roses, some garlic, and many other things. And so I'm going to take this 1 tablespoon of the spices and mix it in to the meat. And from the other container, I'm going to add the pine nuts. This is a piece of pottery that was made by a company called Ruche in West Germany in 1967. This particular line of pottery that was called Pompei. And it's a very modernist kind of way of referencing those pots that were found on the archaeological site. And so from this bottle, I'm going to pour olive oil into the mixture. Just a little bit. Next, you're going to take green onions.
Green onions, ecco qua.
Okay.
Now, to cut the green onions, I decided to use a meteor. The reason for this is that I was very taken by these images that were shared with me by Andrea and Marianna. This image of the statue looking as though they're almost like a petrified body looking at the archives of Pompeii reminded me of this. Another image. But that reminded me of this, which are the actual bodies. And when I saw the actual bodies on the Pompei site, or I should say rather the castings of the bodies on the Pompei site, they immediately reminded me of the dinosaurs And the dinosaurs were very influential on me when I was a kid. And so whenever I saw fossilized dinosaurs, those dinosaurs also looked like they were writhing in pain at the impact of the asteroid that hit the Earth a little more than 66 million years ago. That asteroid that hit the Earth was actually made of a material called carbonaceous chondrite. And the Chicxulub crater, which is an impact crater that's buried underneath the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, was 10 kilometers in diameter. And it was made by this meteor of the same size that struck the Earth slightly more than 66 million years ago. And a widely accepted theory is that worldwide climate disruption from the event was the cause of the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction event, which led to the death of, or the extinction of 75% of plant and animal species on Earth, including all non-avian dinosaurs. So this is a piece of a meteor that fell in Africa that's made from the same material, carbonaceous chondrite. And so I'm going to use this to cut the onions to commemorate that kind of event, those moments of cataclysm that lead to the ending of life and the beginning of new life. Okay, so now I'm going to take my onions and I'm going to mix them in with the lamb. Next, we need some salt. And the salt I have is lava salt. And so this is salt that's harvested in Iceland, and it's mixed in with activated charcoal that's harvested from lava rocks. In order to do this, in order to include it into the mix of meat and spices, it needs to be a more fine granule than it is right now. And so in order to do that, I'm going to use a mortar and pestle. And this is the amazing mortar and pestle that was found on the Pompei site. But I'm going to use a mortar and pestle that is supposedly made from Carrara marble. And I was trained as a stone carver when I was growing up. And one of the things that I purchased a long time ago was a block of marble that was harvested from Carrara that I still haven't carved, and it was supposedly harvested before all of the pure white marble had disappeared. But I like veins in my marble, and I like veins in my stone because they're the document of some kind of geological trauma or some kind of cataclysm that can never be hidden. It's not trying to be something that it isn't. And so these are stones that I've kept in my studio that document this. So being able to kind of find the boundary between one period of time and another is possible when looking at these stones. And it's also created when there's a gap when a stone forms and water rushes in with minerals to make something new and to fill in this space. So here you can see the lava salt. I'm not going to crush it too much.
Okay.
And salt is always a tricky thing. With lamb, you want to taste the flavor of the meat. And so I'm going to put it in pinches. Now, the recipe we're making is my family's traditional recipe for what's called kofta. It's basically a meatball. Okay, and now I'm going to mix it all together by hand. It's becoming its own aggregate, like sedimentary stone, creating concretions around organic material. And so there's history. And who knows how long a period of time this really is for an organism that's living within the protein of the meat. Okay, so now I'm going to need to wash my hands. And for that, I have a bowl, or rather a vase. And this vase that I have, I collected it in response to this beautiful photo that was also included with the Pompei materials. And what Andrea wrote to me about this was that the surface that's created on here, where you see all of these different granules and pieces of material attached to it, was created during the volcanic eruption. The incandescent ashes and the lapilli erupted during the volcanic explosion and hit the vases, leaving various signs on their surfaces, sometimes also remaining attached to them, and chemically causing their random color change. Furthermore, the hemp ropes that surrounded the neck of the vases, after being hit by the lapilli, and due to the surrounding heat, turned into a sort of incandescent stone rope mixture, which then cooled down, keeping the same position and assuming part of the material, and so the color of the original rope, now dissolved into the still visible polymorphic stone. So this particular vase was made in 1970 by a West German company called Roth. And this is what they call the fat lava technique. And so what they do in this particular form of firing ceramic is they will put things like pumice and silica and other materials that are found in volcanic ash to create these kinds of controlled cataclysms within the kiln. And so what you end up here is this mimicry of what happens when lava craters and explodes. And so it's from here that I'll get my water to clean my hands. Now, I don't know about you, but I could use a glass of wine. And so I'm going to use this vase that's also from the Pompei series made by Ruchte in West Germany in 1967. And when I got turned away from the airport last night and I went to get ingredients to cook with you all in this way today, I bought this bottle of Italian wine, and it kind of describes exactly how I was feeling about myself in the evening. So let me decant this wonderful wine.
Adesso il vino anche loro. Se lo beve lui, sì.
No, no, adesso ci vedrà chi ci dirà di darlo. Stupendo comunque.
Saluti. Okay. So now it's time to cook this meat. But before we do that, we have to actually separate it out into the meatballs. And in order to do that, I'm going to use a geode that was formed inside a piece of lava that was found at Mount Vesuvius and harvested by a geologist who works at my school, where I teach at Northwestern University. Let's see if you can see the crystals. Can you see the crystals? Can you see the crystals? There are the crystals. And geodes are formed when there are pockets of air within rocks. This often happens after volcanic eruptions when lava cools around air bubbles. These pockets leave space for groundwater to seep in, but the water itself doesn't produce geodes. It brings along minerals which stay in the rock even after the water evaporates. So, in order to make the shapes for the meatballs, I'm going to cast them in the cavity of the geode. And so if we were together, you would be eating a meatball that comes out of a space that was made for you by the volcanic eruption of Vesuvius. So can a volcano be a sculptural mold? And what I often think about when I think about casting as a form of sculpture is I think about it as a transmission that goes between generations. So from the cast to the clay or the plaster, and from the plaster to us, a kind of communication of spatial information and also knowledge. And so now, in order to cook this, I'm going to go get something from the oven. I'll be right back.
Accendere il forno.
Così anch'io sono qui. Facciamo notte.
La tua.
So this is what's called lava stone. And it is harvested from the volcanic regions of Italy. So I guess that would be like Mount Etna, areas like that. And I think about the possibility that maybe they share vents with Pompei, with Vesuvius. Maybe there's a point at which that lava from Vesuvius mixes with the lava from Etna. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some olive oil and put it on this paper towel
Ok.
to season the surface of my lava stone. And very simply now, I'm going to take these casts of the interior of the geode and put them on the lava stone to cook.
Sai che non cucino niente qua.
I wish you were here to smell, because what's coming into the air is mixing with the air that's been here before, and the air that's been here before, and the air that's been here before, and the air that's been here before. And so maybe you can smell it. Maybe it'll just take a while. So while this is cooking, I'm going to put it into contact with a few more things. This is a specimen that's called Dr. Strangelove material. And it's gathered from the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary in Denmark. And this is a boundary of the post-ocean shore. So after all of the algae died, this is believed to be the kind of petrification and the fossilization of that algae.
Ti ho chiesto di prendere...
Sì.
Vabbè. Le pinze. Prego. Se c'è l'altro vassoio. Così intanto riempo. Grazie.
I also really fell in love with these photos that Marianna and Andrea shared with me. And these are pieces of glass that were probably from glass block that was being prepared to make things out of glass. But when the extreme heat was visited on the glass, which itself gets created through extreme heat from particles like sand, this is the form that they took. And then this is a human brain from Pompeii that was discovered, that was vitrified and turned to glass because of the extreme heat and then the extreme drop of temperature afterwards. And that's how Libyan desert glass was made, which was found at the border between Libya and Egypt, also from an impact crater from millions of years ago. And so we're going to bring that into contact with the meat as well. As I mentioned before, this is the Haggadah. This is actually from Baghdad. My grandfather had the same exact edition. And one thing you may or may not be able to read here if you read Hebrew is that these prayer books were actually were printed in Livorno, Italy. And I did a project with this for the Cerruti Foundation, the Cerruti collection last year with Castello di Rivoli. And one thing that always fascinates me about old Haggadahs, you have to drink 4 glasses of wine during the Seder. And so every Haggadah that I know of always has stains of wine. And when I looked at this one, I started to fantasize that these wine stains were actually the Tigris and the Euphrates River. And I think about these stains and these lines, these veins, in relationship to the veins in these stones that I talked about before.
Sì. Che dentro non sono ancora cotte.
These are looking really good, almost done.
We are a little bit late, but it's okay.
Questo è... Questo è...
Andrea and Marianna, how are you doing?
Just fine.
Fine. We are not sure they are cooked inside yet.
Should give us a little bit more, like few minutes more. If you are ready, we are ready in a while.
No problem. It's hard to believe it's hotter in Chicago.
The smell is amazing. Yeah.
Excellent. That's the eruption we're hoping for.
Exactly.
Andiamo qua. Secondo me è andata. Che dici? Devono essere, secondo te, cotte molto bene.
These are volcanic bombs. And these are from 60 to 20 million years ago. And they formed this superstition. It's from a volcanic eruption that formed the Superstition Mountains in Arizona and the San Juan Mountains in Colorado. And when I bought this, the seller sent me for free something that broke in transit, but it's still beautiful. And this is what they call volcanic rope. Because when the volcano erupts, the lava takes the form of this kind of rope sometimes. So again, the volcano is a sculptor.
The first 3 ones are ready.
Excellent. Are there more than 3 people in the audience?
Sure. Okay, I think that I should start serving these 3 ones, otherwise they will be cold.
Wonderful.
Vado io.
No, just 2.
Facciamo così.
Wow. Yeah. Adesso arriva il tovagliolo.
Thank you for making these, Marianna and Andrea.
Arriva anche
Lo
il
vuoi?
tovagliolo.
No? Sì, fuori. Adesso poi. Abbiamo dato le prime 3 perché per cercare di cominciare, però le altre stanno cucinando.
Sì.
Ci vuole ancora un po'. E non è così calda.
nostra versione è all'albese. Ok. Ok, it's okay.
Dice di alzare il forno.
Non si può alzare.
When I saw this image from Pompeii,
Più alto?
it made me think about the projects that I do here with the substitutes for the items that have been looted from the National Museum of Iraq, made out of papier-mâché, from Middle Eastern food packaging, from spices like the ones I'm using today. But it also got me thinking about what it means to make a ruin from the ground up. And to be surrounded by fragments.
Ok, altri due.
Ok.
Other
I'm going to
two.
try one.
Other two are ready.
It came out good here. So Bilatia, enjoy. And to Marianna and Andrea, tell them Ashdidak, which means bless your hands. Or actually more literally, may your hands not hurt you. But it's what you say to compliment the chef.
Facciamo un brindisi con Michael.
Fai un saluto tu.
Bevi. Forse qualcuna di queste qui.
Thank you, Michael, for our first Seder at the Castello di Rivoli in Pompei. I think so. Thank you so much. And,
Thank you.
We are almost ready, but I think few minutes more.
No problem.
We
Well,
are-
I have a
We are cooking an Albese version of the Seder. It will be
wonderful.
Afro, but that's okay.
I have one last act.
Queste qua. Se ce n'è altri due le faccio.
Sì.
And for this one, I'm going to go outside.
Ah, yeah.
But before I go outside, I'll show you the pictures. This is Mount St. Helens in Washington State. And it erupted when I was a child in 1980. And this is what it looked like before, the photo with the blue sky, and this is what it looked like afterwards. And so you see the way in which the mountain completely changed. But something that they find is that volcanic ash, and this was volcanic ash that was harvested from Mount St. Helens, is very nutritious for soil, that it carries with it all the kind of seeds of nutrients that when it is exposed, when the tephra is exposed to things like chemical weathering, it starts to release those nutrients into the soil. And so what I had hoped to do was to end the Seder with everyone at Castello di Rivoli, which is of course on the very top of a hill. And everyone would take a small handful of the ash and we would throw it together off of the hill and to the sides of it so that it would mix with the soil and maybe something new could grow, that new life could grow from something that came to the surface with such force. And so I'm going to go out to our garden and spread these ashes of the volcano as a substitute for spreading them with you in Turin. So here's our garden. And you can see it's actually snowing already. Over here is where rucola usually grows, and sage, and mint. And there's tomatoes that are usually here. So I'm going to make a commitment to the future. Spreading these ashes to the soil. So our rucola and our tomatoes and our sage and our mint next year will grow from the nutrients of the volcano.
So we are serving the Seder now, soon after this.
So thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you.
It has been so poetic, and it looked like you were here with us, giving us instruction how to cook, how to prepare, and sharing this together with the audience, taking time for cooking, for thinking about different matter, also about your collection, talking about matter. This arrived 2 days ago, and supposed to be part of the performance here, but then it arrived, Michael not. But it's a way of being a little bit more together. And we serve some wine, as you suggested us with this, and we share it with the public. So your beautiful action, it's like a great summa of your topics, of all the elements that compose your articulated practice. And before I was talking about the idea of nourishment, what we bring, what we embody in ourselves. We embodied history, we embodied the power of fragment, the history of monument, also the revisitation of monument. In our conversation, we talk about the importance of a change story to monument, respecting the history of monument, but also to considering how the flow of history affect, and we need to flow with it sometimes. And so this being together, which is another strong aspect of Michael Rakowitz practice, the collective participation and of this Seder that again highlights archaeology, life, geology, as I said previously, ecology. So thank you, and thank to the audience for being here. That I think we run out of time. There's a navetta leaving soon, so we will enjoy a few more meatballs, and we all leave. Thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Comunque, scusa,